Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTB World, and of course with me are Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important topics. The first one is going to be taking a look at the current economic challenges that the country is facing, of course, for quite some time now. And of course, we know that before the end of the previous government's tenure, there was the establishment of the SIFC, which was started keeping in mind the fact that there needs to be a platform or a body that exclusively looks after the bringing in more investment in the country, and of course also in a way that ensures continuity of the platform and the efforts made in this direction. And there have been some hopeful news coming in from the Chief of Army Staff as well regarding the kind of investment that possibly will be in. But of course, there are plenty of other concerns within the country that still remain given our economic challenges. And we also know that a resolve was expressed during the Corps Commanders Conference, which was of course presided over by the Chief of Army Staff, who said that this is something that the military establishment is going to be taking a look at as well, which is to wholeheartedly assist the government in curbing all illegal activities that is impeding any sort of economic progress in the country. And this, of course, involves a number of measures taken previously, of course, with reference to the power sector. There was a lot of issue and talks with regards to curbing line losses, to curb power thefts and other issues that may come about. There was also particular reference to supporting the economic development of areas that need help, such as those in Balochistan. Interestingly, another aspect that is being discussed and mulled over by different quarters in order to curb corrupt practices and illegal activities is also the demonetization of the 5,000 rupee note, and something that we'll explore further, whether or not this is something that is the right solution moving forward, and what are the pros and cons of this particular measure, and when exactly should the government be taking it, if it does so at all. And so we're going to also be talking about that and other aspects that can be taken, and what sort of assistance can be expected from the Chief of Army Staff and the SIFC in this regard. Our next segment is going to take a look at what is happening in our neighborhood in India, where we've seen previously also and even now that the BJP once again is using the anti-Pakistan rhetoric to move forward with the campaign of the upcoming elections in the country, something that of course we've seen previously as well. But given the kind of violence that we've seen, especially in areas such as Manipur, it's extremely important to see how far this is going to go, and the sort of ways in which this ideology develops and grows on these rifts and frictions within society, how far they're going to go, because so much, of course, has already happened within India, that we want to understand that before the elections, how is this going to play out, and what is the BJP going to do, given the fact that this is something that they always resort to. So we're going to be taking a look at that at the end of this segment. For this and more, of course, Farrukh and Faisal are going to be with us in the discussion, and we've also been joined online by Dr. Aqdas, Afzal, a senior economist, who joined us in our first segment regarding the challenges of the economy. Thank you very much, Dr. Aqdas, for being a part of the show. And let me start with you. Given the fact that there are a number of measures that are being discussed, and you also wrote extensively regarding the aspect of demonetization of the 5,000 rupee note, sort of analyzing the benefits and the potential aspects that can go wrong with demonetization as well. And I want to ask you in that respect, in terms of where we stand today, in terms of the kind of challenges that exist within Pakistan. Do you think that this is something that is recommended? You say at the end that there is a time for it, but I want to know whether or not you think that that actually is the right step forward in a different time perhaps, but compared to not doing it at all, is that something that we should be considering?
Thank you very much for taking me on the show, Sana. Well, I think I wrote about this demonetization, and certainly this idea of demonetization has been gaining traction. And of course, one of our neighboring countries, India, a few years ago, went through a very painful exercise of demonetizing some of its higher banknotes. And I think there were a lot of learnings for people like myself who had been watching this experiment unfold in India very, very closely, because I was interested in what was going on in terms of curbing corruption and what have you. So I think when it comes to demonetization, there are certainly a lot of benefits, and I have written about this in a column that I wrote for a newspaper. But there are also certain, how should I say, shortcomings if the whole exercise of demonetization is not done properly. I mean, if we don't plan for it and if it's not executed properly, it can actually turn into a very, very, how should I say, a harrowing, economically harrowing scenario, given the already uncertain economic environment in which we are operating. So I think all in all, it seems like an interesting idea. There are a lot of benefits when it comes to demonetization. For instance, um, you can curb corruption. You can make sure that that illicit money cannot be used in the upcoming general elections. You can enhance the tax base by forcing people to deposit their ill-gotten wealth and then declare that in their income statements. And you also curb certain uses of illicit money vis-a-vis terrorism and money laundering. So there are a lot of benefits. And before I forget, I think there is an added benefit of uh, promoting and encouraging digitization in the economy. A very interesting experiment is going on in Islamabad as we speak. And since all of you are in Islamabad, you must have noticed, how the use of plastic money has gone up exponentially ever since this experiment started. So I think there are some very, very concrete positive aspects of demonetization. But
Right.
I say this with the assumption that the whole experiment has to be planned and executed very, very carefully. Because if we try to do this in haste, it can backfire in a very major way.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Aqdas, you also wrote about certain aspects of this experiment, so to speak, in India, talking about the kind of advantages. You also say, of course, in terms of the kind of ways that it actually curbs corrupt practices, but because it backfired in terms of the reasons you expressed that the cash was returned. And of course, that was one aspect that was necessary for it not to be returned for us to actually curb the illicit practice going on. And then also that cash wasn't stored in most cases, which is why that benefit also wasn't gained. And then I want to know, when you talk about proper planning, then in terms of its execution, how will these two aspects be planned for? If this is something that is not the case, if the cash is not stored, and in fact, if the cash is returned, then how do we plan for this?
And Dr. Aqdas, if you allow me to just attach another question with it, that is related to, you highlighted obviously electronic money. Of course, the whole world is looking forward to it, and India has started now. But if we talk about Europe, they have been doing it since a long time, and people don't carry any notes anyway nowadays there. So if we get into our own society, of course, literacy rate we have, wouldn't it be a huge challenge when it comes to frauds, when it comes to mistakes being made by them and losing money?
Okay, so let me try to answer two questions in turn. I think the first question had to do with what kind of planning would be required. And this is the question posed to me by Sana. Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is to have a very good idea of how much of the money is comprised of these 5,000 rupee notes. We need to have a very, very good calculation and idea of that, because if our estimates are wrong, then whatever it is that we are trying to supply in the ATMs, or whatever it is that we are trying to provide to people when they come to the bank in order to exchange it for another currency note, or when we have these long lines, I think things could go awry. So I think that's the first thing that needs to be done very, very carefully. And it should just not be done by the state bank. I think there should be a committee of independent economists working with the economists in the state bank, who can then have a very good estimation of the amount of money in circulation that comprises of the 5,000 rupee note. So I think that is the kind of planning that I am basically talking about, having a very realistic assessment. So now to turn to the question that Faisal posed, I think this is a very interesting question, and a very important question at that. I think where I agree with the point that you are making, that there is a certain cost that has to be borne whenever something like this, for example, technological solutions are made. Um, uh, whenever they are made, uh, the main way of conducting transactions. Uh, but you have to remember that all societies have gone through similar episodes in which um, there came a time when they decided that they had to move in the direction of technology and digitization. Yes, there is going to be a very, very steep learning curve. People are going to have to learn how to carry out these digital transactions. And yes, there are going to be frauds. And yes, there are going to be a lot of accidents. But I think all in um, all said and done, I think the benefits of digitization in Pakistani economy far outweigh relying on cash in circulation.
All right. Farrukh, of course, Dr. Aqdas is pointing towards the possible benefit of demonetization, given the fact, of course, that there is a lot of planning. I want to know whether you think similarly in terms of this being a good way forward, if, of course, so many conditions of planning are actually met, or not at all even then.
Thank you very much, Sana. I thought that you will never ask because the discussion was going on and I was just bubbling to chip in. My introduction to Dr. Aqdas actually came from the very article that you are mentioning. It appeared in Dawn a couple of years ago. And at that time, I was skeptical. But then Dr. Saab actually won me over with another piece on super intelligence, because I'm also into AI, so I'm a big fan of any person who is perceptive in that department. But that was the time when I was really highly critical of India's experiment. Because in the face of it, on the face of it, it was essentially done to curb black money. What they did was one fine morning, they decided they are going to do away with certain currency notes of higher denomination. And after that, what happened was it was bedlam. India and Pakistan both are the countries that can claim to be moving towards digitization or digitalization, either way. But frankly, most of the economy is basically dependent not even on banks, but on currency notes. Given that now, when perhaps Dr. Saab actually first suggested it, perhaps it was doable because at that time rupee's value was far better. Now the rupee has been sinking for quite some time, and at this moment, if you actually do away with the highest denomination, what you do is you encourage people to actually invest in other measures. For example, people might actually start saving dollars rather than 5,000 rupee note, because they don't have the kind of money for the kind of, they don't have the kind of tender to do the, economic activities that they want, or perhaps sinking money in gold for that matter. I understand that there is a desire for digitization, and I love the idea. But the biggest problem is that if you want to do it, you have to do it through incentives. And there is something that is going on already. For example, through mobile apps, particularly Easy Paisa and all others, right? Jazz Cash and many others. So through that, people are now moving towards that already.
Yeah.
But if you actually, do away with 5,000 rupee, bill, you're going to create bedlam, you're going to create crisis. In fact, I am in support of the idea of actually printing money in even bigger denomination, right? 10,000 rupee note. Because purchasing power of rupee has sunk, and it will take some time to come back. My biggest concern is the way India did it, whether it was a good idea or not. In the end, it became an ugly sore on the face of Indian economy. The day when the machines ran out of ATM cash, what happened then? You saw people in long queues, and then many perished, Sana. We cannot, biggest problem with our policy making in Islamabad is that we have this God syndrome, that perhaps if we are sitting here, we can do anything, whatever we want with the people. But what happens on the ground, it can create, really, it can wreak havoc. So my humble submission is, I was not a big supporter of this idea, even when it was first introduced by India. But right now, if you do it, you're encouraging people to store more money into means that you want to discourage, not encourage. And remember, after India actually went for this measure, the very same currency note has been restored. So what was the point? The whole idea of saying that these things can be done, and after wreaking havoc, I know Adanis and Ambanis might have really made a lot of money out of that measure as well. But the common man, especially small, medium, SME sector and micro sector was destroyed. So
Right.
you can't do it.
Dr.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Aqdas, I'm sure you want to add something to that, but also give your perspective on, given the current situation, then if demonetization is off the table, then what do we do in terms of curbing those corrupt practices?
Okay, so I think Farrukh Sahab has laid out his case very, very clearly and intelligently, as he always does. There are a few things that I want to say about what he has just said. Look, the position that I'm taking is that there are benefits potentially associated with something like demonetization. And I've mentioned them in my piece. But at the same time, the column that I wrote about demonetization, I specifically said that there are a number of negative aspects of demonetization. Number one among which is that it can serve as a monetary shock to the economy. It is akin to taking out a massive chunk of liquidity, which can then mitigate against not only everyday.
Yes?
Yeah, technology.
Right, unfortunately, we're unable to hear you, Dr. Aqdas, but hoping that you'll be back with us
he's
soon.
back.
Yes,
He's
continue.
back. Please resume, sir.
I am really excited about the digitization part of the whole exercise because I feel that I think the future of Pakistan has to be based on an economy in which a great chunk of transactions take place through digital sources or digital platforms. And we have to develop, even the caretaker science and technology minister, Dr. Umar Saif, has been trying to bring PayPal and certain other payment platforms to Pakistan. So I think these are some very exciting directions in which this economy has to move. And demonetization could serve as a fillip or as a, how should I say, a big step in the direction of monetization. So, and to answer the last part of, not to answer, just to add to what Farrukh Sahab was saying about how prices have gone up in the last 5 years and how the value of the 5,000 rupee note has shrunk, I completely agree. I think, and he also made a very interesting point. He said, actually, he would like to have notes of higher denomination than the 5,000 rupee note. I could not agree more. I think we should do away with the 5,000 rupee note and then print some more 10,000 rupee notes. So somebody who goes to the bank, turns in 2 5,000 rupee notes, could walk out with a brand new 10,000 rupee note. In this way, both Farrukh Sahab and I would be very happy.
Not with the first part, but
Excellent.
with the second part. of course.
Dr. Aqdas, talking about the economy and obviously future of Pakistan, currently, we are seeing that the Chief of the Army Staff, he is obviously showing the will that he is wholeheartedly, with the government and wants the economy to get fixed. And if we look at the steps taken, SIFC, of course, they are, attracting the investments in Pakistan, FDIs. Can we say that there will be success in coming future, number one? And number two, we keep on talking about the ample opportunity and the sort of, we have the IT experts and we have the workforce as well. We're just waiting for the FDIs to come in the IT sector, especially related to artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. Do you believe that in coming future, we will be able to grab on a good number of billions in these fields, especially knowing the fact that it is being repeatedly said that in last a year and a half, of course, a large number of IT specialists, they have been obviously getting the jobs outside of the country, and they were leaving the country?
Okay, so to answer your first question, I think these new institutions in the form of the SIFC, I think this is a welcome development, and I have spoken about this the welcome nature of this development previously on this platform as well as other places, because I think one of the strengths of the Pakistani political system is the dynamic ability of our civilian and military institutions to come together in times of crises. And this is a very, very major crisis. Our economy has perhaps not faced this magnitude or a crisis of this magnitude in the past. So I think this is one of the strengths of our political system, that both civilian and military institutions can come together as they did during COVID-19 in the establishment of the NCOC, if you may remember that. So I think this is a big plus. Now, how successful is this new institution going to be? I think it depends on a number of factors, some of which are not in Pakistan's control. I've been reading, I'm a voracious reader of international and global economic situation, and I have been noting the kinds of very challenging winds that have started blowing in different economies around the world. I mean, Chinese economy is certainly under pressure. The European economies have not been able to grow. There is talk of stagflation in Europe. Only the American economy is growing at a robust place, plus a number of other couple of economies in the G20, like Saudi Arabia and India. Apart from these countries, very few countries are economically growing. And I think the coming months and perhaps the next year is going to be a very challenging time economically, especially for countries like Pakistan. So I think we have to do our homework. We have to make the preparations. And depending on what the global situation is going to be like, I think that is really going to determine how successful the efforts coming out of the SIFC are going to be. But if we are doing nothing, if we are sitting on our hands and we are not establishing new institutions like SIFC, I can guarantee you that nothing is going to change for the better in Pakistan. So at least by trying to establish new institutions like the SIFC, we are doing the right kind of planning and preparation to take our economy forward.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Aqdas Afzal, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, of course, I understand that the Chief of Army Staff has reiterated his resolve, and of course the SIFC is also there to support our economic progress. But I want to know what sort of measures tangibly can be taken in terms of the corrupt practices that need to be curbed, especially given the fact that the platform also, of course, has the move forward or the resolution towards gaining more FDI in the country. Will they also be then working very actively on this aspect?
Right. Sana, will you allow me a second to actually respond to something that Dr. Saab earlier said regarding shock to the system, right? Our economy doesn't need any shocks. You know, at this moment you're in ICU, your chest is open, and the cardiologists, arms are up till elbow inside the chest, right? And they are pumping the heart. What else can you have as a shock, right? At this moment, we don't need this currency business at all. I think that the most important thing is, one, because they are hoarders, because there are corrupt practices everywhere, right? From electricity theft to dollar hoarding, to sugar smuggling and hoarding. And similarly, umpteen other things. I think Army's role is very important. It is critical.
True.
And let me remind everybody that when 6 years ago or 5 years ago, General Bajwa was added to the Economic Council at the time, I was the first person to object to it, right?
Okay.
But this time, because A, the crisis is so big, secondly, the way things have actually unfolded, and we keep on thinking that we are, cursed by the curse of Sisyphus. You keep on pushing the boulder up to the mountain's top, and then it comes back the next day, right? So there needs to be some kind of direct measures to, intimidate the negative elements in the society. And how does it function, Sana? I hope you remember, I mentioned it earlier as well. There's a Punjabi saying, चार किताबा उत्तर लथिया नालिक लथा दिगा चार किताबा कुछ ना किता दिगे किता सिदा, right? 4 books descended from the sky, and then along came a rod. The 4 books could not reform humanity. The rod did so. So at this moment, I think it is very important that army plays this role. Then of course, our military also has a very important role in military diplomacy, especially in the Arab world.
Right.
And we have seen that playing out. I keep on mentioning people. Today you saw those military leaders as well. General Said was also sitting in SIFC, right? These people have really burned midnight oil to ensure that investment comes. So if that comes, and if the investor wants some assurances on ground, I think that army is in better shape to help with that. Unfortunately, our media is so cynical and it does so little research that people keep on confusing it with something else that is going on.
Right.
Let us be honest. Had there, if there was going to be any kind of takeover, it would have taken already. It did not. That means the people who are there are trying to help the country revive its economy, not to do something else.
Okay.
So why actually confuse it at all?
Right, absolutely. And we, of course, have huge hopes from the SIFC regarding this matter. But we're now also going to be taking a look at what is happening in India, especially in terms of the anti-Pakistan narrative that we are again seeing. We've also been joined by Mr. Najam Saqib, who's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for being a part of the discussion. And considering, of course, the kind of precedents that have been there with the BJP and the way that this rhetoric is used, of course, whenever there is the upcoming elections in India, there is a lot of concern, not just mainly in terms of the anti-Pakistan rhetoric, but also in terms of the kind of violence that perhaps we see on the streets and may even be encouraged by the state in terms of them, of course, building upon that. Do you think that, considering what we've seen recently, especially in Manipur and other areas of India, that perhaps this time around the situation is deteriorating even more and more each year, and now what we're going to be seeing in the general election is something which is worrisome and should be a matter of concern internationally?
Thank you, Sana, and salam to Farrukh and Faisal. I have been, out for the last 1 hour or so, so I don't know the mood point of your program of tonight. So if you could just tell me, are we talking about the Indian elections 2024, or the situation, political, social, etc., prevailing in India, or India using Pakistan card as one of the elections winning tool? So where are we right now?
Ambassador Saab, it doesn't seem like you've been out because you're right on point. We're talking about all of these.
Okay. I have been watching these pre-poll happenings, and particularly on Tuesday, there were some 7 states where elections were held, and people of India generally who are not happy with the BJP-led, alliance, and particularly BJP and its anti-India or anti-Bharat agenda. So 4 of the 7 seats have been won by this bloc called India, INDIA, which is Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance, India. Now there is a problem there because, BJP and Prime Minister Modi wants to change the name of India as Bharat. So this particular bloc also says that if you change the name, we are going to change it also, and we will make it Bharat. And there are questions in India that, okay, you change the name, but will you be able to change, the level of poverty in India, or the violations of human rights in India, and in particular the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? So there are, there is a situation, there is an atmosphere in India right now. As we speak, naturally, it is the G20 and the initial embarrassments that Prime Minister Modi and his team has to face by the absence of a few very prominent guests. and the speeches that are being made there on religion, etc., etc. So it's a very interesting atmosphere, ambiance for any diplomat or any journalist for that matter, to see what actually India is selling these days. Can you imagine that a country which claims that it has touched the surface of the moon from the side that nobody has ever been there, they cannot get neighbors over, in New Delhi. So the paradox is there, and as far as the card is concerned, that India plays, of course. And I was wondering, and actually I was a little afraid to see the emerging scenario, because this bloc, India is going to give a very tough time to BJP-led alliance. That I can assure you. And if there is no rigging, and if the elections are free and fair, particularly the few seats that are being contested by the end of this year, or the Lok Sabha elections in 2024, this bloc is going to give a very strong, challenge to the ruling BJP. Now, what I'm afraid of is that, just like a BrahMos cruise missile accidentally being fired, or some dude called Abhinandan, coming to our territory, I can visualize, but I don't think that India is going to have all these false flag operations now. But knowing the two tenures of Prime Minister Modi, he can go to any extent, may it be firing a cruise missile and afterwards saying that it was an accidental thing, and etc. He can go to any extent. But using Pakistan card is very handy. Using Pakistan, or talking about Pakistan and what Pakistan has allegedly done so far, or the problems. Pakistan itself is a pebble in the shoe for India, because in its aims and objectives of the Akhand Bharat and the undivided Bharat and Bharat itself, Pakistan is the only country in the SAARC region or the adjacent country which is posing some challenges based on certain facts and figures to India. And Pakistan's friendship, of course, with India's enemy China is also a pebble in the shoe. So we are certainly going to see Pakistani card being played in the coming elections, especially the few seats that are going to be decided by the end of this year, and surely in the Lok Sabha elections in 2024.
Very true, sir. Very true, sir. Ambassador Najam Saqib, if we obviously look at the timeline of India's activities, we must remember that while SCO was taking place and our former foreign minister, he was there, of course they knew that the whole world, the media of whole world, and in the important personalities of the whole world, they are in India. So they actually did try to portray one of the incident as conducted by Pakistan's secret intelligence agency ISI. Of course, we know that they once more did it. Should we be expecting during this G20 that suddenly a false flag, another false flag can take place in Jammu or Kashmir, Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, so that the whole media, the focus of the media goes towards labeling Pakistan once more as the terror financier, or somebody who's conducting the terrorism within India? Can we expect that taking place? And second, you have rightly pointed out that India has forgotten their own problems which are being faced by them. I mean, today I was going through one of the fact that India has actually put silver cutlery for the guests for G20, and at the same time we know that India happens to be a country in World Hunger Index. It is placed 107 out of 121 countries. So what kind of country India is, that at the same time, I mean, it is trying to manage so that people, they are not hungry, and at the same time, I mean, for G20, they are boasting to the world as if they have achieved some sort of wealth, and they are very wealthy, and they are one of the best countries.
Yeah, there are 3 or 4 points. I'll try to remember all these one by one and deal with them accordingly. The SCO meeting in which former Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, he went there. I was not expecting him to be that composed and intellectually that inclined to handle all those situations, particularly on the sidelines facing the media. Because in the mood we saw that Jai Shankar, the host foreign minister, he did not treat Bilawal Bhutto as you treat every other guest. He treated and Bilawal, what did Bilawal say or do? He just smiled, and that was the right reaction to this childish hosting foreign minister's gesture. To sum it up, I can say that Jai Shankar, being an astute diplomat and a very shrewd minister of the present government in New Delhi, and Bilawal being a naive, very new in the politics as such, I think he scored a couple of more scores than I was, personally expecting. Saying that the cutlery and all that which you have mentioned, I was just wondering, the best cutlery in the world is made in my city, Sialkot and Wazirabad, and I will not be surprised if all this beautiful cutlery has been somehow imported from Sialkot through some European country and put them, made in India, etc. Third thing is the G20 summit, and already, today it has started, but already there are independent views which are being, portrayed and which are being reflected by international media, that India was not actually prepared to host this very, very important multilateral.
Right, absolutely. Ambassador Saab, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we just have to take a short break. I'll be back with more. Welcome back to the debate. We have Ambassador Najam Saqib with us. Ambassador, please finish your thought.
Yes, it's very important to have a little interlude or a break. And I think the people of India also need a break from the impression, from the impact that India is making on 2 accounts. One is the external account, in which it is going, it says that it is one of the big powers of the world, and it should be a member of the United Nations Security Council, that a part of P5, and we are going to the moon. But on the contrary, the people of India, even the Hindus, I have got certain friends who have told me, who have visited India recently, that not only the Muslims or Sikhs or Christians or Dalits and all kinds of, all castes and creeds, the Hindus themselves, majority of them, they don't want this impression to go outside India, that India will be only for Hindus, and all those Muslims, Christians, etc., they should go out. And as far as the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Amnesty International is there, Asia Watch is there, the world is watching there. And I am waiting for the moment when the international community itself, we have this human rights declaration, a major part of United Nations. So why the international community is silent? We have got some answers like importance of India, as the policeman of the United States of America, the China containment policy, and in the
Right,
region.
absolutely. Absolutely, Ambassador Saab. Again, I apologize for the interruption, but we're out of time. But it was lovely having you, and hopefully next time we will not have an interlude interrupting us. Well, thank you very much for being part of the discussion, Faisal and Farrukh as well. That's all we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.